First off, I want to thank you all for the amazing support you've shown to the podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Most Advanced Featured and Accurate, quick podcast summaries on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. It will save you from spending 15 to 20 hours per week catching up. It's a great way to stay informed while saving time for less than the price of candy in most places. Here's a rundown on these ancient manifestation secrets. Change Everything About Law of Attraction, featuring Greg Braden by Lewis Howes. Greg Braden's conversation with Lewis Howes is a deep dive into the human potential and the future of our world.
Greg starts by sharing a philosophy that consciousness informs itself through its creations, and that everything we build in the world around us, from technology to art, he believes that we are the product of multiple generations where the idea of being human has been denigrated, and that we are teaching our young people that emotions, empathy, and self-regulation are flaws. According to Greg, by the year 2030, we will either have awakened to the truth of our untapped human potential, or we will be locked into a society of hybrid humans engineered away from our powers of creativity, emotion, empathy, and intuition. Greg shares that Ray Kurzweil, a futurist and author, has stated that by 2030, we will no longer be talking to a pure human, but rather someone who has either embraced or been mandated to have some kind of technology accepted into their bodies. By 2045, we will have achieved what Kurzweil calls the singularity, where we will have become a digital representation of ourselves in the Internet of all things.
Lewis asks Greg how people can tap into their untapped human potential and manifest their dreams and desires.
Greg shares his personal story of growing up in a dysfunctional and abusive family, but having a strong soul compass that allowed him to not believe the negative messages he received. He found solace in music and left home at the age of 14 to pursue his passion. Greg emphasizes the importance of honoring and respecting the gift of the body and finding ways to serve and love the world. Greg explains that we are moving rapidly toward the close of a cycle, and that there are cycles within cycles that are converging around the year 2030. He mentions that the United Nations has identified 2030 as the year they want to remake society and the world through the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The World Economic Forum has also identified 2030 as their target date for their vision of what they want the world to look like. Greg expresses concern about the relationship between the WEF and the UN and how their vision for the world is the same. He mentions that the UN has had a series of programs, including the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a list of 17 things that, on the surface, seem beautiful, but may have underlying implications.
Greg gives examples of some of the goals, such as food security, and asks Lewis if he wants to hear more. For example, food security is supposed to be a good thing, but the plan is to pump money into big pharma and big agriculture, corporate farms, GMO seeds, and GMO insects. This is forcing small farmers out of business, not just in America, but all over the world. These big corporate farms are buying up farmland, which isn't good for us. Some of the climate goals being proposed are also concerning. If we were to meet these goals, we'd see a significant drop in carbon dioxide levels, but this would actually be bad for the planet. CO2 levels have been higher in the past, during the Cretaceous and Jurassic periods, and life thrived. In fact, the Earth was lush and green, and temperatures were a little warmer. But if we were to drop CO2 levels to the proposed levels, it would lead to forest die-offs and extinction-level conditions. This would also drive the average global temperature down to around 46 degrees Fahrenheit, resulting in more ice in the northern hemisphere and forest die-offs. There's also a concern about the encouragement of conflict and the depletion of resources, manpower, and weapons. This is leading to a remaking of the planet, our defenses, and society. The social bonds that hold us together as families and communities are being systematically dismantled, starting with the Occupy movement and continuing with other divisive issues. This is all part of a systematic movement to remake the world in a way that's not good for us. But what's really interesting is that This is also a movement to remake the world within us. We now have the technology to change the biology of our bodies and what it means to be human. This is where the concept of human divinity comes in. It's the part of us that's timeless, ageless, and where our love, sympathy, empathy, compassion, forgiveness, and understanding begin.
For example, Greg Braden's personal story of growing up in a dysfunctional family and being told what his limits were as a human being is a testament to this. He didn't accept those limits and instead pushed against them. He also shares a story about how he dealt with unresolved grief after his mom passed away and how it affected his physical health. He found that through grief counseling and redefining his sense of safety, he was able to heal and move forward. Ultimately, it's about recognizing our own power and divinity and not letting others define our limits or our world.
Lewis Howes notes that it's scary when people experience symptoms like heart palpitations, anxiety, or panic attacks and aren't sure if it's grief or something else.
Greg Braden suggests that it's always good to get these symptoms checked out by a medical professional, but also emphasizes the importance of understanding what's really happening in the body. According to Greg Braden, every emotion that people have ever had in their lives, from before birth to the present day, has a chemical equivalent called neuropeptides. These neuropeptides are created by emotions and can metabolize through the body. But if people can't resolve the emotion, the neuropeptides can stay in the body and be stored in organs, tissues, and glands associated with trauma. Greg Braden notes that everyone has trauma and that it's personalized, and that the neuropeptides can stay in the body for 10 minutes or 70 years until people have the tools to resolve the trauma. Greg Braden explains that when people experience symptoms, it's often because their body is trying to tell them something, and that rather than saying their body is broken, it's more useful to ask what environment they're giving their body to work with. He notes that over 90% of the environment is emotional, and that sometimes the emotional environment is subconscious. In his own case, Greg Braden had a subconscious fear of not being safe, which was rooted in his childhood experiences.
Lewis Howes notes that even though Greg Braden was an adult with resources and protection, the little boy in him still didn't feel safe.
Greg Braden explains that this is because the first 7 years of life are a critical period for learning and absorbing behavior patterns from caregivers, and that this is why the Jesuits would say, "Give us your sons," until the age of 7, and they'll be ours forever. Greg Braden notes that the neuropeptides can stay in the body as long as they need to, and that there are techniques like breathwork, heart-brain coherence, and body memory therapy that can help resolve them. He explains that when people do resolve their trauma, the neuropeptides will metabolize through the body and be released through body secretions like tears, perspiration, and saliva. Greg Braden discusses the concept of human divinity, which is the part of people that is timeless, ageless, and all-knowing. He notes that this is where healing begins, and that the science is showing that divinity doesn't live in the cells of the body, but rather in an energetic field that underlies all existence. This field was confirmed by the CERN Superconducting Supercollider in 2012, and was further confirmed by the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2022.
Lewis Howes asks Greg Braden to explain what this field is, and Greg Braden notes that it's an energetic field that people are a part of, and that every human cell is emerging from and collapsing into this field every nanosecond. He explains that when people change their thoughts and feelings, they can change the template that their body is building itself around, and that this is why healing is possible.
Greg Braden notes that there are organizations in the world that will go to great lengths to shield people from their divinity, because when people are in their power, they are less vulnerable to fear. He believes that this is why there are so many distractions in the world, from wars to economic collapses to pandemics, and that the ultimate goal is to keep people from their divine nature. Greg Braden notes that this is an ancient battle between good and evil, and that evil means different things to different people, but ultimately it means shielding people from their divinity. Greg Braden believes that the human body is the prize, and that the ultimate goal is to replace human biology with technology, AI, and computer chips. He notes that this is a very different way of thinking, and that it's a window of time when people need to be aware of what's happening and make conscious choices about their own biology and divinity. The world may seem crazy, but there's actually a method and a system at play. It's just a window of time where the powers that be are jockeying for position. The problem is our humanness is a powerful force that's being suppressed. We're being told that we're flawed and need something outside of ourselves to be the best version of ourselves. This is especially true for kids, who are being encouraged to give themselves away to virtual reality and computer chips. For example, Elon Musk's Neuralink chip allows humans to communicate directly with computers without any wires. While it may seem cool, it's actually a biological imperative that's being ignored. The adage "use it or lose it" is a perfect example. If we don't engage our neurons in a meaningful way, they'll atrophy and die. This is true for all systems in the body. We're a biological system that works on demand. If we don't use it, we lose it. They're just watching instead of engaging and creating. This can all be reversed through epigenetics, but it's not harmless. The impact is real, and it's another example of how our biology is being replaced with technology. This is all part of a larger movement called transhumanism, which is beyond human biology. It's not a natural part of our evolution, but rather a technological one that's not good for us. We're losing the essence of our humanity, our ability to love, forgive, sympathize, and empathize. We're being taught to judge instead of discern. There's a concerted effort to diminish the power of our humanness, and it's being accomplished through policies and mandates that encourage or require us to accept technology into our bodies. This is a problem because we're relinquishing our precious, ancient, and sacred gift of humanity. We're being taught that we're flawed and powerless, and that we need something outside of us to be whole. But the new science is showing us that we're actually highly advanced, technologically sophisticated being. Our biology is being redefined as a form of information technology. For example, human DNA is literally a fractal antenna that receives multiple signals from a broad spectrum of bandwidth simultaneously. We're pulling in information from the world around us and transducing it into meaningful signals in our bodies. Every cell in our body is a miniature microcircuit that functions as a transistor, resistor, or capacitor. We have 50 trillion cells in our body, each with a voltage of about 0.07 volts. That's over 3 trillion volts of electrical potential in our bodies. If we could harness that, we could optimize our healing, cognition, and more. We're also receiving and transmitting photons of information, and our DNA stores every successful genetic transaction in our species in a way that's transparent, immutable, and secure. This is similar to blockchain technology, which mimics the way information is stored in our DNA. The human brain is being compared to a microprocessor, and scientists are finding that it's 100-fold faster than modern processors. The beauty of this is that our biology is scalable in a way that computer chips are not. Human neurons can morph and adapt to open up new vistas of processing capability, and we may be infinite when it comes to scalability. There was an experiment where scientists took human neurons and put them into a petri dish, where they were able to play the game Pong. The neurons learned and got better over time, but the question is, how did they know how to play Pong? The answer is that the instructions weren't stored in the neuron, but rather in the field that underlies all existence. This field is information, and our neurons are the antennas that connect us to it. When we replace our biology with technology, we're disconnecting ourselves from this field and losing our humanity. This loss of divinity strips us of our ability to love, forgive, heal, innovate, imagine, and create. These are the very qualities that make us human and the reason we're so valuable. The transhuman movement seeks to take away these qualities, and the next 5 years are crucial in determining the course of our future. The human body is incredibly powerful, and its value lies in its ability to function as a fractal antenna, receiving information from the outside world and our emotional environment. Our inner self-talk and the stories we tell ourselves play a vital role in shaping our lives and determining what we attract into our reality. The way we think about ourselves and our story defines every relationship we'll ever have. And it's essential to believe in our own story. Many people struggle to believe they're worthy and deserving of love, abundance, and health, especially if they've had a traumatic past. However, it's possible to start believing in oneself by recognizing that we are not what we've been told, and that we're more than we've been led to believe. We need reasons to think differently about ourselves, and knowledge is power. Our subconscious mind is reflected in our body, and what we believe about ourselves creates the chemicals in our body. The words we use and the sounds we make have a profound impact on our lives and the lives of those around us. We express a frequency based on the words we use, and every other person receives that frequency. The meaning we give to words is what matters, not the words themselves. Our interpretation of words is what either supports or harms us. Breaking free from a life of pain, sadness, and suffering requires accepting responsibility for our choices and choosing not to be defined by our past. We have the ability to choose, and it's a conscious choice to free ourselves from the hurt and misfortune of our past. Our human divinity allows us to do this, and it's essential to preserve, claim, and protect the gift of our bodies. Once we relinquish our humanness to technology, we'll never get it back, and we become something very different. It's a question that is answered through the choices we make, the politics we choose, the medical systems we choose, the food we eat, the wars we create, or the peace we create. However, to answer this question, we need to understand the context. The battle between good and evil is not a battle that can be won by fighting. Instead, it's a battle that requires us to live the best version of ourselves. We need to live our humanness, our divinity, love fearlessly, innovate, create, and forgive without expectation. For someone who has had a rough life and is feeling stuck or broken, the first step is to know that they have a choice. Knowledge is power, and it's essential to recognize that we have the power to choose how we live our lives. The second step is to be willing to tap into our divinity and humanity, recognizing that we are rare, precious, and beautiful forms of light. We need to see ourselves as temples, with the innermost sanctum being the nucleus of every cell in our body, which holds the information that reminds us that we are not what we've been told. To release the trauma that we've experienced, we need to use techniques such as breathwork, emotional freedom techniques, and heart-brain coherence. These techniques can help us release the trauma physically and chemically, allowing us to then work on the emotional component. It's not about understanding why someone did something bad to us. It's about releasing the trauma and freeing the neuropeptides that were created from that trauma. The process of releasing trauma is not easy, but it's possible. It requires us to dive deep, to be willing to face our emotions, and to use techniques that can help us release the trauma. The result is a sense of freedom, peace, and emotional abundance. We need to remember that we are human, and we have a choice. We can choose to live the best version of ourselves, to love fearlessly, and to forgive without expectation. We can choose to see ourselves as temples, with the innermost sanctum being the nucleus of every cell in our body. We can choose to release the trauma and live a life of peace and freedom. According to Gregg Braden, the key to healing is not just about understanding and releasing trauma, but also about physically and chemically freeing oneself from it.
Lewis Howes asks how one can emotionally link their experiences together so that the emotions don't come back, and Gregg responds that it's about changing the significance and meaning given to past experiences.
Gregg shares that he has a personal connection to the topic of healing, having lost family members in the Holocaust and being part of the Cherokee community that experienced the Trail of Tears. He emphasizes that healing is a process, not an event, and that our bodies are wired to heal. However, the environment plays a crucial role in initiating that healing, and it's essential to feel worthy of it.
Lewis asks how one can start to believe they are worthy after decades of being told otherwise.
Gregg responds that it's about recognizing the possibility of another reality and having faith in oneself. He emphasizes that knowledge is not enough. One needs to experience it for themselves. Gregg shares that he had to seek out a community that believed in themselves to overcome his own insecurities. He explains that being in relationships with people who have the parts of us that we've lost or given away can help us feel whole again. He also mentions that the Institute of HeartMath has shown that the heart has an energetic component that can influence the world around us.
Lewis and Gregg discuss how surrounding oneself with people who have a healthier sense of self can influence one's own body and promote healing.
Greg shares that he has seen this happen in his own life, where he started to feel different and make healthier choices. He emphasizes that it's about respecting and appreciating the human body and recognizing its worth. Greg also shares an example of how the environment can affect our health, citing the case of a community in Peru that started to experience obesity and diabetes after the introduction of fast food. He emphasizes that it's essential to nourish our bodies with food that supports the gift of life.
The conversation is powerful, and Lewis thanks Greg for sharing his insights. Greg apologizes for talking too much and offers to answer any final questions Lewis may have.
He encouraged his audience to get a copy of Greg's book, Pure Human: The Hidden Truth of Our Divinity, Power, and Destiny, and to leave a comment on YouTube or Apple Spotify with their biggest insight or takeaway from the conversation.
Gregg Braden was ready for the lightning round of questions, and Lewis asked him what was blocking his abundance at this stage of his life.
Greg replied that he felt nothing was blocking his abundance, and that he was feeling better than ever at 70 years old. He attributed this to his mindset, which he had developed over the years. He shared a story about how his mom had given him a book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran when he was 10 years old, which had a profound impact on him. One chapter in particular had stuck with him, which said, "Work is love made visible." This mindset had helped him to approach his work with a sense of purpose and passion. Greg explained that he used to work loading boxcars with 50-pound bags of Purina cat chow, but he had found a way to make it enjoyable by focusing on the physical workout he was getting. He said that it was all about mindset, and that if you approach your work with the right attitude, you can find joy and fulfillment in IT.
Lewis asked Greg how people could support and follow him, and Greg mentioned his website, gregbraden.com, which had all the information about his workshops, retreats, and live events. Lewis also asked Greg about his 200-year plan, which Greg had mentioned earlier, and Greg said that he would love to talk more about it in the future. Lewis then asked Greg to share 3 truths that he would leave behind if he were to live to be 200 years old and then pass away.
Greg thought for a moment before responding that his 3 truths would be that we are divine beings, that we should love fearlessly and work together to make the world a better place, and that we should look back on our lives and be grateful for the good that we have done.
Lewis was deeply moved by Greg's response and acknowledged him for being a conscious leader in the world.
He thanked Greg for being a vessel of service, truth, and knowledge, and for being an interruption to the forces of evil that seek to capture people's hearts and souls.
Greg was visibly touched by Lewis's words and thanked him for the acknowledgement. Lewis then asked Greg to define greatness, and Greg replied that greatness is when we say yes to what the universe has brought to our doorstep and do our best to make it happen. He said that greatness is about allowing our divinity, light, and love to shine through and bring joy to ourselves and others. As the conversation came to a close, Lewis thanked Greg for being on the show and encouraged his audience to like, comment, and subscribe to his channel. He also mentioned his new book, Make Money Easy, which is all about creating financial freedom and abundance. Thank you for tuning in. Please click follow button, and just remember, subscription is only $1 per month. Leave a comment or review. Until next time, happy listening. Whoa.